Okay, I hope you can hear me. And I hope you can see AJ. But I'll tell you right now, the quality's not the greatest. We're kind of filming in the corner of a bar. We're B-dubs again, of course. And this is one of those videos where we throw a bunch of stuff on here to pretty much just like get the list completely like worked down to there's nothing, we can start from scratch again. That's basically what it is. And you guys can't see me, but I'm still speaking with my hands because that's how I do things. But we're going to talk about 20 movies here. There's some limited releases, there's some documentaries, there's some stuff from TIFF, there's a lot of things on here, a lot of different things. So, AJ, take it away.
The first 10 are just like normal movies. We're going to start with And So It Goes. This is also a lot of stuff we're catching up on too, because this came out like months ago, and we never got it around here.
Nope.
It's a comedy. I use that term loosely though.
You seem unsure.
It has Michael Douglas and Dayani Cristal. And that's it. You would think it'd be like one of those, there's a few people you recognize things, or there's like a big actor and a small part. No, it's Michael Douglas, Dayani Cristal, a bunch of people I don't know.
If you don't know these people, that's not a good sign for its cast.
Maybe if I look them up, I've seen them in other things, but like the names that come up and the people in the movie, I don't, recognize immediately.
That's interesting.
Well, it's kind of an awkward plot when you look at real life, because what starts the plot off is Michael Douglas' son going to prison. But the thing is he's like this widower who goes to he's not over his wife's death, and it's been years, and it's made him like a really bitter old man. That old thing. And Dayani Cristal is the woman that he's always wanted but never had, that lives next door. But, nothing's happening there because he's just acting all embittered to the world. So when his son goes to prison, he has to leave his daughter, his little girl, with Michael Douglas because he's pretty much the only family, and he has to take care of her. Whether or not the embittered old man becomes soft and lovey by the end, you just have to wait and see. It's not totally terrible. As you probably know by now, I'm not much of a Dayani Cristal fan. I don't hate her, I'm just not a big fan. But I do love Michael Douglas, but he's given this... He does what he can. He's pretty much anything remotely funny that happens in this movie is because of him.
Okay.
There's a scene where he gets flashed by a kid, and his reaction was really funny to me. Hey, your dick's out.
True Michael Douglas manner.
It's just some innocent kid changing out of like a bathing suit, like because they're playing in sprinklers outside.
Yeah.
And he's just like watching this. It's not in a creepy way as it might sound, but in context. Because it's happening in front. He's angry that it's happening in front of him. It's not like something he's intentionally going for.
You need to get out of my face right now. I'm breaking all sorts of laws.
But it becomes one of those sweet movies where he and Dayani Cristal work together. After for a while there, he makes her stay with Dayani Cristal and says, just handle this for a while. I can't. I don't want to. But then his lighter side comes out, and they have a nice bond and all that. She ends up there's a subplot where they're gonna send her away to her mom, but her mom ends up being a druggie, so they say, okay, you're coming back home with us and all that. A lot like that episode of Roseanne, but yeah, it's a comedy. It doesn't really work because it's really not that funny. Like I said, he has a few moments that work, but other than that, it's the relationship between him and the girl is pretty much the only thing that kind of rings true. But there's more of it that doesn't work than that stuff. So I don't know.
This was a popular movie a lot of people in this town wanted to see, too.
Yeah, I was going to say, your grandparents would probably love it. Apart from that, I don't know. It's just...
Not a very glowing recommendation.
It's one of those movies where we have montages of them going to, like, theme parks. Well, amusement parks, like the flying chairs and shit from 3 Days to Kill.
Oh, right on, okay.
The rides they have at, like, our homecoming. That shit.
The death traps?
Yeah. They look a little less deadly. So. screws weren't falling off of them or anything. So that's what that is. Our next movie is White Bird in a Blizzard, which is getting some attention because it's Shailene Woodley's other movie this year. But much better one, I promise. And it's her mom is Eva Green. And she has this really horrible relationship with her. Like, she's like, her mom is totally out of her mind. And then one day she just up and disappears, like into thin air. And there's a couple of things going on. It's kind of somewhat a coming-of-age story with her. And she's got her friends, like Gabrielle Stritch is one of her friends, who's actually not bad in this, even though I hate her in pretty much everything else I've seen her in. Up to and including her 30 Seconds and 7 Psychopaths.
Tower Heist? She was kind of just there.
Well, the real standout of this movie, besides Woodley, who I'm really not a Woodley fan, but she is good here. Her dad is Chris Maloney. And you'll notice, whenever Chris Maloney falls in love with Eva Green, bad shit happens.
This is true.
Twice this year now. And it kind of, there's that coming of age story portion, which is kind of the first half, because she has a relationship with, what's that kid's name from Evil Dead? The new Evil Dead. Shiloh Fernandez, I think. He was also in The East.
Yeah.
The first half is like her love story with him, and she also has an on-again, off-again love affair with the cop that's investigating her mom's disappearance, and it's Thomas Jane.
Okay.
Yeah, the age difference is a matter there. They don't just, glance over that or anything. And then the second half, which obviously is the part I liked a lot better. Like, for a while, I wasn't liking it at all, really. But because Eva Green, as much as I love her, is like really over the top and Joan Crawford-y. The second half is more of like, I wouldn't necessarily say a thriller, but kind of like a crime mystery, where it really gets into maybe something ominous happened to her mom and she didn't just up and leave. And it's interesting. There's a twist and turn here or there that you probably won't see coming. So that was nice. And the thing I really liked about it the most was the ending. Like, it's kind of abrupt. Like, it's one of those endings where it feels like it's going somewhere and it's gonna peak, but then it just stops and we're just kind of told the rest through her narration. But there's something about the ending I still thought really worked, though, and made the movie. That second half makes the first half look a lot better. So, yeah, it's worth checking out. Like I said, much better than her other movie this year. Our next movie is an interesting movie I just recently heard about, called, I don't like the title, but it's also the title the book is based on. It's called Good People. It's a crime movie that stars James Franco and Kate Hudson as a married couple. You're going to love a casting choice here.
Of course. I like it already.
It's a very basic, obvious story. They play a desperate married couple who happens to fall into the wrong kind of money. Because the movie starts with a heist, and one of the guys screws everybody over and shoots them and takes off with the money. And he just happens to live in the apartment building that Franco is the landlord for. And then when he up and dies of a drug overdose, Franco and Hudson find the money, and they want to have a baby. They're about to be evicted. Naturally, they just take the money and hide it. But and they're pursued by a cop who's investigating, which is Tom Wilkinson. And most importantly, they're pursued by the main crime boss, who the money belongs to, and that is Omar Sy from The Untouchables.
That's awesome.
And this is one of those movies where this will kind of catch you by surprise, because it seems like a really basic movie, but the end of it turns into The Equalizer.
Interesting.
Because the violence in the movie is like few and far between, but when it happens, it's really, really graphic. And it gets to the point to where Franco booby traps the house in very graphic ways, like taking spears of wood and making them sharp and making like death traps with them.
Like Home Alone mixed with Saw.
It's like The Equalizer.
Like The Equalizer, exactly.
A nail gun goes into play here as well. So yeah, it's not like great or original, but it's also worth checking out because it has its moments for sure. Okay. Our next movie had some potential, but it goes to waste. It's a movie called Two Night Stand. It's a romantic comedy with Miles Teller and Annalee Tipton, where basically Annalee Tipton has been single for a while, so she decides she's going to go on one of those dating sites for a one-night stand, and she meets Miles Teller. So she goes over to his apartment, they have the one-night stand, everything's great. But overnight, a giant blizzard happens. So when they wake up, they realize that they don't like each other and they fight. And then when she goes to pack up her stuff and leave, she can't get out because the blizzard has completely buried the entire bottom half of this apartment building. So she has to stay, the two of them hating each other have to stay in this apartment together and hate each other until they love each other. The end. It's one of those movies where it's obvious that they're trying to be really, really clever and do the thing where they talk about, you know, the mechanics of relationships and shit like that. And like it's like a new thing. And sometimes they succeed. For the first half I was into it, but this about maybe 50 minutes in, it just really shits the bed and just goes into every possible predictable. I mean, it's already predictable from the start, but I mean, it gets really, really. And there's some directions it goes that are totally incomprehensible. Like, not to give too much away, but there's a point in time where Miles Teller attempts to win her over by getting her arrested. Yeah, in context, it doesn't really make sense either. So I don't know what to tell you. If you haven't seen it. And they're two really appealing actors. So
Oh yeah.
this could have worked, but the writing wasn't on their side.
That's a shame. This sounds like something I would enjoy.
You probably still would.
Thanks.
So yeah, if it had been more like the first half, I think it would have been a little better, but it just got, the directions it started to go were just, I don't know. Our next movie is a horror movie that got some attention. Like, real horror movie fans were talking about it, but I don't think anybody else is really, it wasn't like really big. It's a movie called Honeymoon, which is, I feel like Mark Duplass should have been in this movie with how indie it was. Indie horror it was. Like, I don't even really know how to go about explaining it. The first half hour is just us getting to know this newly married couple, and they're so ridiculously lovey. Like, her name is, they have this thing where her name is B-E-A, so he calls her Honeybee. And she has this thing where she like touches his lips and makes a buzzing sound. It's just their thing.
Interesting.
I don't know. But, and it's one of those really, really slow burn horror movies. Those indie movies where, you know, it's what they don't show. You know, what we just talked about with Blair Witch and Paranormal Activity.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to see what direction it's heading, which could be a compliment, because a lot of people like that abstract thing, especially in horror, because the less you know, the freakier it can seem.
Totally.
But this really just seemed to be adding up to nothing. Like, there's this guy there that seems really abusive with a girlfriend, and it's actually her ex. And they're thinking maybe it's him doing the weird shit, because she has what looks like bites on her legs. And and she's starting to act like not herself, obviously. And it just kind of goes in a nothing direction. There's one scene that's kind of like the big payoff, but with all this build-up, like an entire movie of build-up, I was expecting maybe a little more of a payoff than that. It's mainly, it's a gross out payoff, if that's what you're looking for, but I don't know. I still don't really know what to think about this, but I don't think I thought positively of it.
What kind of horror would this be? Like psychological horror? Is it a serial killer? Is there?
It's a I mean, there's something I could say, but it's spoilery.
Okay.
But I think it's mainly building itself up as a psychological thing.
Okay.
So, yeah, I don't know. I was prepared to kind of like it or love it. I didn't want to get your hopes up. Because this type of movie can always go one way or the other.
Oh yeah.
But this one wasn't really doing it for me, so that's a bummer. You might remember our next movie because we saw a lot of trailers for it, but we never got it here. From the Rough.
Yeah, I remember hearing about
the golfing movie with Taraji P. Henson. I want to start off by saying that this movie's ad campaign is really shitty. Because it's Taraji P. Henson that's the star of it. The second star of it is pretty much Tom Felton.
Okay.
But that's not what the posters and the trailers tell you. The posters and the trailers tell you that Michael Clarke Duncan is the second star.
Okay.
And building it up as this was his final movie, I think. His final well, no, I think he's got one more on his IMDb page that's in post, but they were building this up as pretty much his last movie.
Okay.
He has a few scenes in the wise janitor role. That's pretty much it.
He's in the trailers.
Yeah, what you probably saw in the trailers was pretty much all he does. He only has like 3 scenes, and he's just there to do, like I said, the wise janitor thing, the Charles S. Dutton from Rudy thing, or what Mr. T spoofed that with in Not Another Teen Movie. Anyway, it brings you pretty much everything you'd expect from a golfing movie starring Taraji P. Henson that didn't get a very wide release. This movie's kind of hilarious for all the bad reasons.
Ooh.
First off, it's the thing where she has to do the ragtag group of golfers. I don't know.
Okay.
And all of them are stereotypes. You have the Asian guy that thinks he's black. You have the Australian guy who always greets you with "Good day, mate," and you have Tom Felton basically doing his. Tom Felton is basically going to play pissy characters for like the next 20 years. And then there was some other character in there, like the "I'm tough, I don't need this" character. And she basically plays the tough coach that they all hate. She's basically playing a female Major Payne with golf. There's even a point in time where she's spraying them with a hose to make it seem like it's raining. That's how.
This has humor written all over it.
But this fucking sucks. The guy that played her husband in No Good Deed is the guy that's trying to push her to get them in the competition. But he's pissed off because it's supposed to be like a minority thing. Mm-hmm. But she's saying, like it's minority schools, and he's saying, well, I want all black people on the team. And so he's pissed off that like only one of them is. Or no, none of them really are. I guess the Asian guy doesn't count.
Unbelievable.
You know what? Whatever. So,
glad we didn't get this movie now.
No, the thing about it is it's already bad up to that point, but the trouble is usually you can kind of win. If you're a sports movie about a ragtag team, you can generally win your audience over with the final competition.
Yeah.
But the trouble is we don't really even see much of this competition. Like, we see people hitting golf balls, but we're not really seeing where they land or really what the score is. And then finally we're on the 18th hole and they just say, well, if you sink this, you win. That's what the whole build up to this movie is.
Tin Cup has more golf than this movie.
So, yeah, that's what that is. Taraji P. Henson keeps making a big deal about all those shitty roles she's getting because she's a black actress. This was, you could tell she was like trying to really do something Oscar-y with it. This just is not that movie, I'm sorry. Okay. Our next movie is called Premature.
I know where this is headed.
It is an indie comedy with one recognizable face in it, and that one recognizable face is Alan Tudyk.
Wow.
Now, some of those kids look familiar. No, the kid from Submarine is in it as well.
Oh, sweet.
He plays like the comedy sidekick character that gets all of the funny lines. Well, we already had... This sounds weird. I'm talking about an indie sex comedy. We already had Edge of Tomorrow this year, which was Groundhog Day by way of Starship Troopers.
Yep.
This movie is Groundhog Day with premature ejaculation. It got really quiet in here when I said that. Okay, here's the concept. The first scene of the movie is this dude getting laid by a girl with 3 tits. Turns out he's having a wet dream. And he wakes up, he's in his underwear and he's wet. So he goes to school and he has to do this interview with Alan Tudyk to get into his dad's alma mater.
Okay.
And he's getting seduced by the hottest girl in school for some reason. But he has his best friend there who he's supposed to watch the spelling bee on TV with because that's their friendship thing. At this point in the movie, knowing the concept from the IMDb page, I knew how it was going to end. And the opening credits had not even ended yet. And I'm sure you can put it together as well.
Yeah.
So the thing is the day goes horribly. And just as he's about to lose his virginity to the hottest girl in school, the title happens. And he wakes up in bed, just like he did at the start. And he's going to relive this day over and over and over again until he loses his virginity in the way the universe wants him to.
What song is playing on the alarm clock?
They couldn't get the rights to anything, apparently. So,
Still going good?
so that's what the setup is. Which they could have done something with. But, and, you know, it was kind of on a roll there for a while. The jokes weren't always hitting, but there were a few jokes that did. Like I said, Craig Roberts from Submarine is the main comedy character, and he's given, you know, he makes a lot of movie references, like, there's a kid with a unibrow he's making fun of, and he says, you know, it's thicker than Sam Elliott's mustache. There's a line where he says, the hottest girl in school supposedly inspired the King's Speech. Because apparently the last kid that slept with her had a stutter, and then he didn't afterwards.
Wow.
That's kind of funny.
That is funny.
But it really, really wears thin after the first half hour. And they do the thing where it really starts to focus on, oh, will he choose the best friend over the hottest girl in school? And they take it like immediately in that direction completely almost. And from there it just goes totally to shit. And it never recovers. It gets worse and worse. And and like I said, you know this ending from the beginning. And it's just, you just have to slowly watch the movie get to that point.
Kind of like American Pie.
Not really.
Well, choosing the hottest girl versus someone else. That's what I'm talking about.
That's a lot of movies.
It's a lot better looking.
And we can throw this on that pile now. So, yeah, a lot of it does. This concept totally could work.
Yeah, it sounds like a movie that could have worked.
But no, not this way.
Was it a bad script? Just horrible?
It's about a lot of things.
Oh.
The lead character was like. Imagine if Topher Grace kind of looked like Michael Shannon.
Oh God. You can't unsee that, folks. You just can't.
He definitely had Topher Grace's voice. Like, if I shut my eyes, I was like, is this from, like, 1999? And this was, like, supposed to be Topher Grace's breakout or something? But no, whatever. Well, you know, post that 70s show, but...
Yeah, right on.
We're talking as if Topher Grace is even in this movie now. That's... Okay. We're not really getting any better. Our next movie is an indie love story starring Juliette Lewis called Kelly and Cal. Because you can't have an indie movie without Juliette Lewis.
True.
Or Parker Posey. In this case, it's Juliette Lewis. Nothing against Juliette Lewis, but I would have really loved some Parker Posey. I wonder what she would have done with this part. It might have been better. But, oh no, never mind. The writing still would have screwed them over. Let's talk indie romance. Indie romance is pretty much its own genre now of just like quirky bullshit for the sake of being quirky bullshit.
You hate this genre.
Well, here's the thing. Juliette Lewis is a new mother and she's trying to take care of this baby, but she pretty much has no help from her husband. Her husband's very, very neglectful and just doesn't seem to give a shit about anything. You know, doesn't want to screw her or anything. So she starts to hang out with a neighborhood kid. It's the kid from Chasing Mavericks. I forget what his name is. I saw him in a few things. Something Weston, I think. But anyway, well, the first time we see him, he's like hanging over the fence, and he's like, hey, and he introduces himself, and they, you know, talk it up, and apparently he spies on her while she breastfeeds through the window, because he thinks she's hot. But of course she doesn't think it's creepy because, oh my god, somebody wants me, hooray. So she just goes with it, even though the kid is like a kid. The actor's got to be like in his 20s, but he's playing like a 17-year-old.
Okay.
Well, sure enough, he starts to walk away from the fence, and she looks over. He's in a wheelchair, and you do not know indie romance until you see Juliette Lewis walking down the street with a kid in a wheelchair.
Oh man.
Now the problem with this movie is, first off, that's just kind of a weird setup.
Very much so.
Because Juliette Lewis, I'm not sure how old she is, and she still looks good, you know.
Yeah, she does.
But, you know, the kid's supposed to be like 17, and he spies on her. But a friendship blossoms immediately. It's one of those unlikely pairing friendship movies. I think IMDb's plot outline even says that. But he starts to fall in love with her. And they start, you don't really know where she's coming from, because it's definitely a love story to him. For her, we can't really tell. Either she feels the same, or it's just he's showing her what her husband won't think. We never really know for sure. So there's conflict because of that. And the main problem here is all the characters in this movie act like they are 5 years old. There's a lot of tantrums in this movie that are really embarrassing, especially from the guy. And it's once again, I'm saying this a lot, it's one of those movies that I think could have worked, and I liked it for a little bit, but as it started to go, it got worse and worse. So, but if you're like really into that indie romance thing, you might just eat this up. It's pretty much made for that. Our next movie, we're not having a very good run here now. Our next movie is called The Moment, which fans of hers may get excited for, because there's a lot of talk about how she really needs a comeback. And it sounds like she may be getting it soon, hopefully. I'm talking about Jennifer Jason Leigh. This is some indie movie that she was in this year that I saw recently, where I don't really know what her problem is, but she's got problems. Because she has, like, I guess blackouts, they never really say. And she does the Natalie Portman and Black Swan thing where she'll compulsively scratch herself. She'll black out, and then suddenly she'll be in a public place with no clothes on, and her daughter has to take her to like a psychiatric place. So this is one of those movies that fucks with the timeline. There are two characters in this movie played by Martin Henderson. The first part is she thinks in one of these blackouts she may have murdered her ex-boyfriend. Because she goes to his house to confront him, and there's like, his fish is dead, and there's maggots on his food, and he's nowhere to be found. And the second half is her in this psychiatric ward with her, oh my god, what's her name? From Secrets and Lies. Plays her psychiatrist. And we're cutting back and forth because okay. In the flashbacks with her ex-boyfriend, Martin Henderson plays the boyfriend. But in the present day, she meets a doctor that's also played by him. And I guess it's, the whole, where is her sanity? What status is it at? Mm-hmm. But honestly, with this and the fact that it just jumps time without really, any indication, except, oh, Martin Henderson has a beard, this must be the past. That makes it really confusing, and not in the good, hey, let's put a puzzle together confusing, just like the, what the fuck are you doing kind of confusing. This movie doesn't know what it's doing. And it's one of those things where it tries to, like, you know, have payoffs and show like clues, because a lot of the shots are exactly the same. It feels so redundant. Because we get like 5 different shots of the exact same thing, where it's like, oh, in the next shot this will have a different meaning. Or not. And it's a really, really frustrating movie. She's really good in it, and Henderson's not bad either. Her daughter is a main character. Her character daughter in the movie. And this is just one of those characters that just, I don't know if she's supposed to be this way, but you just want to, like, she's a very annoying, frustrating character. And that wasn't helping anything either, when this movie was already kind of annoying the shit out of me for a while. So, yeah, I mean, it has its attempts at twists and turns, but not really. When they show you the same shots 5 or 6 times, there's really no surprises. So maybe you know, Tarantino can help her out with that comeback if what Samuel L. Jackson said is true.
Let's hope it is.
All right. Our next movie is called My Man Is a Loser, which is probably what a lot of women in this building are thinking right now.
In this town.
So, here's the thing. What I'm about to tell you might sound awesome, depending on who you are. If you, like, grew up in the 90s, this will be totally awesome to you. If not, your response might be, who is that, if you're too young. But, here's the thing. This movie, My Man Is a Loser, is basically Hitch with John Stamos.
That sounds awesome.
It's not, I'm sorry. So much wasted potential in these movies.
No lie.
His two friends are Michael Rappaport and some other guy, who I've seen in other movies. I don't remember his name or what movies they were. Those 2 guys are married, and John Stamos isn't. And he's basically, John Stamos is the guy that's with a girl every single night. He'll have a girl coming in as a girl is still leaving, you know. And he's basically, they don't say this because the makers of Hitch would probably sue them, but he's basically their date doctor. And he does the exact Will Smith in Hitch thing. That's exactly what his thing is. And it might sound a little appealing, and Michael Rappaport even had one scene in Hitch, so it all comes full circle.
True.
But the trouble with this is it's no wonder that these guys need a friend like John Stamos, because here's the thing. Kevin James in Hitch didn't need help because, okay, you remember the scene in Hitch when he went to help out that one guy, and the guy ended up just being like a douchebag, and he basically said, you know, I don't help douchebags, and like he like almost broke the guy's arm.
Yeah.
The guy like that is what the 2 guys in this movie are, that are basically the Kevin James of this. We're supposed to watch him help them out. And that's not a very good direction to take this off the bat.
Not really.
But it stays there, and that's what we have to put up with for this movie. All these unlikable douchebags, and we have to watch them be really, really shitty husbands and try to use John Stamos to help them work their marriages out. Why anybody would be interested in watching this, I am not really sure.
Yeah, you're making me lose interest right away.
I know I would not have laid eyes on this if I didn't have to do this fucking video. But I did, unfortunately. So yeah, I mean, it's not like worst of the year material or anything. There's much worse things, but you know, because John Stamos, you know, even though, you know, he's basically living off, you know, Full House reunions
and the Beach Boys. Now,
I think he still has the charm to be able to do a role like this.
He does.
But this once again should not have been that movie. So that's a bummer, because this movie's really, no, just don't.
That's a shame. That's a good premise, and it seems like it fell off the way.
Yeah, Will Smith already did it so far.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a slightly better run here. The next 4 movies are movies that were at last year's TIFF, not the one that just happened.
Okay.
So I think I've almost seen every movie from last year's TIFF now.
Nice.
I still need to see Kill Your Darlings, though. I really want to, but I can't find it anywhere. Our first one is The Love Punch, which is a romantic comedy, also kind of crime thing with Pierce Brosnan and Emma Thompson. I'm so happy for Pierce Brosnan because he needed a good movie this year. Because with The Long Way Down and The November Man, things have been working out for him this year, but he's been really trying. This movie's wonderful. I really like this movie. I don't know what kind of a reaction it initially got. I think it got kind of a lukewarm one, but I really like this movie. They're divorced, and basically they're one of those couples that was so good together, and they're still kind of good together, even apart, that all their friends want nothing more than for them to get back together. So they basically have to pay one of their kids' tuition. But the trouble is they were laid off, more or less. So they get the idea to follow their former boss, on his vacation and rob him of a diamond that he is going to give his fiancée he has just proposed to. So they conspire with their friends, one of which is Timothy Spall.
Nice.
Timothy Spall is fucking hilarious in this movie. He's really great here. And it just turns into this fun caper movie while being kind of a romantic comedy. And Brosnan and Thompson are so good, and they're so good together, that you actually join in with their friends and you desperately want them to end up together. And it's just great. It's really funny, and it can be really romantic in spots. And those moments where they kind of, there's kind of like a little... Normally there's kind of like a conflict where you're like, oh, now they're definitely not getting back together, but I still hope they do, but then they eventually do. That doesn't really happen. Like, there's a conflict pretty early, but the entire last hour is the caper part, and it kind of sticks to that, while also having the romance thing kind of come in at just the right times to do that. Yeah, I thought it balanced it. It sounds like it'd be like really uneven, but I thought everything balanced out really well, and I really got a kick out of this.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So I would check that out. The next one is another one, The Grand Seduction. This is a comedy starring Brendan Gleeson and Taylor Kitsch. Who would have thought of that coupling?
Interesting.
And obviously, since it stars Brendan Gleeson, we're in the middle of nowhere in Ireland. And they're trying to run this town, but what they need for everything to fall in line and for everything to work so they can, it's been a while since I actually watched it. They need to build something, but in order to do this, they need a town doctor, is the gist of it.
Okay.
So they come across Taylor Kitsch, who is an athlete, who also happens to be a well-respected doctor. And he's coming through customs in the airport. And it just so happens that the guy working lives in this town. So they basically kind of blackmail him into it because he's trying to board the plane, and they realize that he has cocaine on him. And it's a really great thing too, because he's like, and then he leaves and he's like, okay, that is cocaine, but maybe we can deal with this civil thing. So they bring him back and have him stay in the town, and they're basically going to try to seduce him into thinking this is the greatest town he's ever lived in, so he'll stay there and move there.
Okay.
And they spy on him and tap his phone and do everything just so they make sure everything that he loves will be in this town. And it is once again, it's really funny, and it's a great concept. It's actually a remake of a French-Canadian movie, I think. Don't quote me on that though, but it's a remake of a foreign movie. It's really funny, and the characters are really Taylor Kitsch is really good in it. He's one of those actors where you can like when he had like John Carter and Battleship back to back, you know, he's one of those actors where if you actually watched him, you kind of knew he wasn't the reason those movies came out the way they did.
Yeah.
He was just getting the shit end of the stick because he was the star of them. Because he's got a lot of charisma and likability on him, and I think he's definitely got. I'm really glad he was cast here because I think it really shows. You know, I never watched Friday Night Lights. I assume he does there too, but. Yeah, I thought he was the real standout here. But Brendan Gleeson is really great in it, though. And there's just the entire town is just a bunch of really funny side characters. Like, none of them really seem like. There's always that one side character where you're just kind of like, well, if that person wasn't in the movie, it might be a little funnier or better. But all the townspeople have their little funny, you know, things about them. So yeah, that's a recommendation too. We're getting better. The next movie, I had interest in this when we first heard about it because I like the concept and it's actually going to sound familiar in this video too. There's two movies in this video that kind of have the same thing going on. This movie is called Felony, and it's basically about 3 cops involved in one incident. We have Joel Edgerton, Tom Wilkinson, and Jay Courtney. Edgerton has just, you know, put away this guy, so he's out celebrating, and he also survived a bullet with his bulletproof vest, but it still, you know, injured him. So he's out celebrating and drinking, and on his way home, he hits a kid he barely taps a kid on a bike with his car, but the kid ends up falling over and getting brain damage.
Oh.
So he calls it in, but instead of saying, you know, I accidentally hit a kid or just driving off, he calls 911 and says that he found him there. So the 2 cops, the 2 partners, are Jay Courtney and Tom Wilkinson, and they show up. And Tom Wilkinson's the one that kind of knows what happened, but he's going to go ahead and cover it up because it's better if it's smoother if things just go like that, just to cover the whole thing up and let it happen, whatever happens. And Jay Courtney is the other cop who kind of comes at odds with Wilkinson because he wants to put away whoever did this, even if that happens to be Edgerton, another cop. And we just kind of follow them in 3 different directions to kind of see how they go about the process of doing what they need to do, about Edgerton trying to get away with it and dealing with the guilt, and Wilkinson trying to cover it up, and Courtney trying to prove that it was him. And it's a really good concept, and it's really well put together, and Edgerton wrote it himself.
Oh, nice.
It's got a really good ending. It's got really nice closure and kind of it might seem kind of heavy-handed and obvious, but the story manages to really balance itself out by the end. So yeah, I would definitely check this out, especially if you like crime movies. Like, it's not like a traditional crime movie like you might be thinking, but it's, you know. So much for that nice run there. Our last movie that was at last year's tip, as of now, is Half of a Yellow Sun, which is a movie about 2 twin sisters that are Tandy Newton and Anika Noni Rose. And their lives go on separate paths in Nigeria during wartime. And I'm already getting tired of talking about this. This movie was on for about 50 minutes and I wanted to go to sleep.
Oh no. Did you make it through the first run, or did you have to come back to it?
No, I watched the whole thing in one sitting, but it was hard. Now the thing here is, and we see them, you know, what happens in their love lives and all that. And Tandy Newton ends up marrying Chiwetel Ejiofor. John Boyega from Attack the Block is in it. He's going to be in the new Star Wars. The guy that everybody thinks looks like young Denzel. And it's basically just one of those, it's a love story during wartime. This movie is so boring that if you go into the IMDb trivia, this movie is actually a romantic story set in wartime, is one of the pieces of trivia.
Ooh, that's never a good sign.
That's all the interesting things they have to tell you about this movie is the fucking plot. It's fairly well shot, and Chiwetel's good in it.
Yeah.
Tandy Newton is kind of... She has good moments and not so good moments. But overall, and there's like... And it's kind of frustrating because it's one of those movies where everything is like really quiet, and a lot of the movie is just people sitting around in living rooms and talking to each other about politics. And then suddenly there'll be like a really loud ass explosion, and the volumes are really not matched.
Okay.
So yeah, this is one of those movies that I kind of just couldn't wait to end. It's not like a dreadful movie. I hear like the novel is really beloved, and this kind of ruined it. So I can't comment on that though since I didn't read it. But yeah, I just kind of even saying the title, I was ready to go to sleep just now.
Just hearing the title kind of gives me that vibe.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, if you need curative insomnia or something, I'd totally seek this out. But that's about all I can say. Okay, our two foreign movies now. We have an Italian movie and a French movie. We'll start with the Italian movie. It's called Human Capital. It is Italy's official submission for the Oscar. And it mainly follows three people. It's about two families, but it's mainly about three people. We have parents and a daughter, and then parents and a son. And these lives converge when the fathers kind of, become acquaintances and play tennis together and decide maybe they can go into business together. With the wife kind of too. And then the son and the daughter of them are kind of like an on-off boyfriend-girlfriend thing. And their lives mainly converge when a cyclist is accidentally hit by a car and goes into the hospital with brain damage. We just talked about this with Felony, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. I watched these movies close together too, so I was like, oh, did I start the wrong movie? But no, it actually comes back, like that's the opening scene, the cyclist getting hit, and then it's kind of like,
Come full circle?
The family drama for about an hour, and then in like the last third act is when the cyclist plot comes back, and it's an interesting mystery because it kind of builds up as to, we don't know which of the characters we already know is the one that hit him, and they're all trying to kind of put the blame on the other, and people may, there's infidelity, and there's, untrustworthiness and all that. Some people might not be the relation to some people we think they might be, stuff like that. And it's not bad. I'm not sure. I find it hard to believe that Italy didn't have, like, I guess a more profound movie to send him. But, yeah, it's fine. It keeps your attention. The characters are rather engaging. They could be boring, but they're not. So, yeah, and it does come together nicely. So, I was expecting some, like, ambiguous bullshit. But no, it comes together nicely, and there's, like, a real, ending to it. And yeah, the girl that plays the daughter is really good in it. So yeah, it's worth checking out. Even especially if you're like an Oscar completist, and I don't know if this will like make the what is it? They cut it down to like 10 or 15. I think, from the submission list. list.
And then you have the 5 that actually get in.
Yeah, I don't imagine that. I mean, foreign is impossible to predict.
Yeah,
really.
no lie.
But if I had to say based off watching it, I don't think this will. I'm not sure this would crack like the top 10 or 15. I don't think it doesn't seem strong enough.
Mm.
But then again, you know, there's a lot of foreign movies that people fall in love with that I'd say that wasn't strong enough for me. So
Same.
I guess we'll find out. You saw my review of Ida. People fucking love Ida.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. That's also on the submission list, so we'll see where that goes.
Gee, that's a shock.
I think that could crack it, but I don't know that Human Capital can. Okay, let me try this.
Oh no.
I checked like 3 different times. I googled, how do you pronounce, and I typed in the title. Because don't want to piss off the French people now. Okay. It's the famous fashion designer who also had there's another biography on him that was at Cannes. And they actually mentioned this movie. This is one of those movies where it was...
Ah, the YSL movie.
the two movies that are the same. They come out in the same year around the same time.
Yeah.
This is not the one that was at Cannes. This is like the low rent version. Though I hear the other one that was at Cannes wasn't very good, even though it's also on the foreign submission list. This one is not. Okay. Yves, no S. Absolutely no S, they said.
Yep.
Saint Laurent.
Yeah.
Okay. I felt weird saying because I feel like I'm just doing a bad French accent when I say it. So, but anyway, yes, it is about the famous fashion designer and his basically, I basically felt like I was watching one of the Ginsberg movies. It's, you know, the guy who became famous through his art, who wears the glasses and has a bunch of gay relationships. I felt like I was watching Howl again, basically, only with fashion instead of poetry.
Fair enough.
You know, to be really close-minded about it. And this is basically just an average biopic movie. Like, it pretty much hits all those biopic marks. And there's really no, I mean, it's well, like, you know, crafted. And there's a decent, like, score going on. The cinematography is fine. Notice how much I'm reaching for compliments here.
The scenery's nice.
The lead actor is fine. The trouble is this guy is so unlikable, I guess.
Okay.
I mean, you don't need to be likable, but I mean, it's kind of hard to watch a movie with this guy as the main character and not feel more interested in his life and less frustrated, but it was kind of the other way around.
Yeah.
And it was to a point where I didn't really care, you know, where this movie was going or what would happen in his life or who he would end up with or whatever was going on. And then it kind of just, like, really jumps in time. Like, everything's going fine and everything looks normal, and then suddenly everybody, like, looks a little older. Like they jumped ahead, like, 20 years. I don't know. So I thought it was kind of all over the place, even though I was trying to like it the best I can. Especially since people think I hate foreign movies way too much. I try, I really do.
He does.
Human Capital was fine. Well, here's the thing though, the subject matter. Even if you made it like the most amazing movie of all time, it might have been a little hard for me to get into a movie about an uptight fashion designer that thinks he's practically God.
Good point.
So, you know, I mean, all, you know, concepts or storylines can be made into something great. But I don't think this is really one of those cases. And I kind of liked it less as it went. So, maybe we'll see what the other one brings.
Yeah.
Because I heard this is like the lower tier version, so maybe that one is, I don't know. It could be worse, I don't know.
Like the 2 Hercules movies this year that came out in theaters.
Alright, we have 4 documentaries and then we're done here. We're gonna, I just like saying the title. It's hard to not say it in his voice. It's To Be Takei, the George Takei documentary. It's basically just about him. Like, it's really not about anything specific that he did. It's just the things that he's dealt with. Like, a lot of it is about the camps that he and his family lived in. And then there's, you know, his Star Trek success, and then there's his relationship with his husband. It's got all the main aspects you know about his life in one place.
Talk about The Apprentice at all?
There was one clip showing of when he got fired. There's a lot of Stern clips.
Of course.
And yeah, it's nice that it's one of those documentaries where you could take somebody who's like a piece of shit, but a documentary can make them look like a saint.
Yeah.
This is one of those documentaries where you can kind of tell that it's his real personality that's coming through. And he just comes off as like this really, you know, likable personality. And it's really easy to watch. Because sometimes you get documentaries about people you just really don't give a shit about. But I really like this one, like from beginning to end. Because he's had such like big things and different things happen in his life that it constantly has something to talk about. Like, usually documentaries kind of like meander and get to places where they're just rambling and like trying to fill in time. But with talking about his life, there's always something to talk about. It's also kind of building to how his life in the camps is being made like into like a Broadway thing. They were hoping to go on Broadway.
I heard about that.
And yeah, you could just see how much of his like real emotion was going into it, and just his husband seems like he can be a little overbearing, but when you see the two of them together, you just can't help just be like really happy for them.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, it's kind of nice to actually see a documentary on an interesting person for once.
Doesn't happen very often.
It's going to happen again in this video, actually, so we're good to go. Not quite yet, though. Well, okay. None of these documentaries are bad, by the way, so just some are more interesting than others.
Okay.
We're going to go next into Who is Dayani Cristal, which was a documentary that was at Sundance last year, which I'm not quite sure what was going on here, but I will do my best. There were two separate things going on. Okay. I know what they were talking about, I know what was going on, but there's one element that I wasn't sure about. It starts off with them finding the body of an immigrant that's unidentified in the desert. They don't know how long, I don't know how long he's been there. But the only thing they have to identify him with was a tattoo on his chest that says Dayani Cristal. Which is apparently like a tattoo that a lot of immigrants have or something. So that's the first part, is they're kind of trying to investigate who he was so they can, contact people and give him a proper burial and all that. The second half is Gael Garcia Bernal, but like he was a big producer on it and he was big in getting it made, and it's basically following him around while he kind of like, I guess it's him as himself, I couldn't really tell, but it's basically him going around and trying to see like how immigrants live, especially when they're like on the run like that, and like how like they live like going from train to train and stuff like that. I was having trouble putting together exactly how they were going to connect these two things and what they had to do. Like, I mean, it's mainly, whoever this guy was that they found, this is basically what he went through before he somehow ended up dead. But the way they do it, the way they have it edited, and how we just keep cutting back and forth, it just kind of seems like two directionless things happening simultaneously, and it's kind of off-putting. It seems like it kind of takes the interest away a lot. I will say it was hard for me to watch because I'm not one for... There are long segments where, I mean, I know it's supposed to be jarring and, like right in your face of what we're dealing with. The whole thing is to figure out about how many, dead immigrants that are unidentified just end up in the desert without being found. And there are long scenes of them finding the remains. And I don't do human bones very well. They freak me out. And they find, like, just skulls or just skulls with still some spine attached and, like, rib cages. I don't do that very well. But it is just like all the dead bodies in the square. It's like it's a little much, but I suppose if you want to show what we're really dealing with, then more power to you. So yeah, I think it got a lot of acclaim out of Sundance. I don't know if it would show up in any
list of any kind.
Yeah, but I guess we'll see. The documentary is another one that's hard to navigate this early without like a predetermined list. So yeah, it's all right. I just kind of wish those things have had a little more cohesion together and would have made it seem more like we were kind of heading in one direction, but it just seemed like I was watching two separate movies back and forth, more or less. So yeah. The next one is The Case Against AIDS, which fighting for gay rights again. I guess. Okay. There's no problem. I'm happy, for them that there are so many cases of people fighting for, gay marriage and equality and all that.
Sure.
But I have seen so many documentaries on it by now. But yeah, this one kind of follows two couples, a male couple and then a female couple, and just basically their fight where they, filed a suit against, Schwarzenegger and, all that, because from when he didn't sign to approve it, which is something that was talked about in the Takei documentary too. Yeah, we're talking just a whole bunch of things are coming together.
True.
But yeah, I didn't really feel like we've been watching documentaries like this since 2009.
Yeah, definitely.
And it just kind of feels like we're all covering this. Like I said, I know it's like a big issue and the ground really needs covered, but I kind of just felt like I was watching a documentary I've seen about 3 times already. The only difference is apparently Rob Reiner knows the people that were involved in this, so he has some random appearances where he's like cheering them on. That was interesting.
That's random.
I don't even know if he's listed as a producer or what. But I don't know. So yeah, that's basically what that is. It's fine if that's like your thing. It has those good emotional moments and shows the fight and what goes into it and all that. So yeah, it's just another one of those. But that's fine. That's perfectly fine. Our last movie is kind of depressing. Elaine Stritch, Shoot Me, which is a documentary about... It's about Elaine Stritch as a whole, but it's mainly about like her last performances, her last few performances. She died a few months after this came out, so that closure is not in the documentary. And that kind of makes it hard to watch. Like when it aired at Sundance, and everybody saw it. When a lot of the people saw this that did see it, she was still alive, so it was probably happier for them.
Yeah.
But watching it here, that doesn't totally taint it, because it does have. The really interesting thing about it is, first off, she was in her 80s, like in her mid 80s.
She lived a full life.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is it shows us how even in her mid 80s she was still doing like everything. Like she lived it like right up to the point that she wasn't. Because the first scene is her just walking around on the street and just being friendly with people. Like some people she seems to know and some people just seem to be random fans. And she would just pretty much talk to anybody. Because she was such this huge name, it's really weird that you'd think you'd have like a diva on your hands by this point, but she was really open with people. And was still like really hilarious, like even in her like really dark spots. Like a lot of the really engaging thing about this movie is a lot of it is focused on her confronting her mortality. And she always has, even when it starts to get like really serious, and there's really real hard-hitting scenes where she's like telling everybody to call the doctor because she's freaking out and she thinks this might be it for her, because she was fighting diabetes. So.
Yeah.
But she always had a sense of humor eventually, no matter how serious the case got. And it's really good. There's a lot of if you were a fan of the show like I was, there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff from 30 Rock. Like her in her apartment watching the show, and then people calling her to say how great it went, and her reading reviews for it. And her playful banter with Alec Baldwin, where she refers to him as Joan Crawford on the set. The relationship between her and Tina Fey, which seemed really nice. And the great kind of setup is they're going through all her old stuff, and it's just a whole bunch of old pictures from in her career and with her husband who died like years and years and years ago, like before I was even born, and she never found love again after him. And every time she picks up a picture, it's like a whole new anecdote from her, early in her career. There's film clips from like A For All Arms and stuff like that, and her Broadway stuff. Her winning the what was it, the Emmy, I think. Yeah. It just has this great moments, but I just love all those real moments. Like she wanted everything filmed. Like, there's even times where she would, like, stop and say, you know, you should really shoot it this way. And then there's one time where he's, like, the cameraman's, like, getting really close to her. And she just stops in mid-sentence and says, don't you think you're a little too close to me? I don't think this is a skin commercial. And then there's a thing where she, like, has she's walking through the kitchen and she's opening muffins. And the camera stays in one spot. And she comes back in and says, no, you need to be following me. We're going to shoot this again. And she was just totally in control, and everybody loved her for it. And you could sense that love that everybody had for her coming in through, like, the interviews and all that. Another person who's no longer with us, there's a few interviews with Gandolfini about it. And that's really tragic, because after a while you see stuff where it seemed like their friendship was really close to. And the really sad thing about what happened and how the documentary ends is she's basically saying, it ends with her doing her thing where she always wanted to leave New York and go back to live in Michigan, her hometown. And it says she's happy and she plans on retiring in 2014. But then it says or 15 or 16, and just her career was going to go as long as she wanted it to. That kind of hurts.
Yeah.
But, you know, her career did go as long as she wanted to, because there are moments, even in those really dark times where she was, like, obviously really scared about her mortality, she was also seeing a really positive side to it. Like, there's this really, you know, big scene where she's just talking to the camera about how, you know, I realize this is pretty much it, and when it happens, it's going to happen, and that's all right. So it might even have more power now in that sense. So it's definitely an interesting watch. It's probably the best documentary of the year. It's right up there with Life itself. I don't know which one I would choose, but it's between the two for sure. And watch none of them get nominated.
That's usually what happens.
So we're finally done here.
So I thought you guys would enjoy a nice little video giving 20 short reviews of movies that AJ has seen recently. And we're going to go back to normal on Friday.
Finally.
Yeah, normalcy, which is going to mean back to movies that are in theaters right now. So we're going to be doing Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day.
Hey, you remember that?
Yes. Dracula Untold and The Judge. And I believe there's a couple more on that video as well.
I'll figure it out.
And of course, Brandyverse is coming this weekend. I want you to watch it. So yes, you'll probably pick up what I'm putting down pretty easily. Ashley should return this week, but no promises yet. Do have some more Disney footage I have to throw up there, and I do have a Halloween Horror Nights video whenever I get around to it. So, AJ, any parting words?